I'm in month 2 of the development of a VR RPG game for the Meta Quest. April was the month I set aside to figure out whether or not it'll even be possible for me to finish the game. Making games bigger than you can actually build is pretty much the most common cause of death for a lot of new games. And unfortunately, I've got a history of making that exact mistake. Welcome, virtual dreamers. My name is Gregory, and we'll be diving into the second development log for my game. When month 1 of development ended and I released the first video, I decided that the next step to development was to determine what would be needed to make the game. To walk you through that, here are the 3 most important systems in my game that I'd need to set up: a meaningful RPG stat progression system, replayable VR gameplay, and deep characters to interact with. Let's see what I did for each one. On the RPG stats, I created a menu system that makes it easy for me to see what the stats are and quickly add EXP, change the time of day, or tweak other game settings. From there, I went ahead and implemented VR gameplay by creating a game manager for a janitor job, as well as a separate scene that could be loaded into for an equivalent VR shooting game. That was all well and good, but the part here that had me the most worried was the last item: the characters to interact with. If you've been following me on Twitter @Marcustal though, you'll know that I wound up using Vroid, UniVRM, and the Cat's Blender plugin to get everything set up and running. Throw in some Mixamo, Unity third-person controller, and asset store animations, and a Brackeys-inspired dialogue system to boot, and we were in a good spot, essentially having a piece of every system that would be needed in my game up and running. Things were looking pretty good, but it can't be forgotten that the problem here was finding out whether or not I'd be able to make the content to finish the game. Nothing here is complete or has a definite endpoint, which is basically free fuel for letting scope get out of hand. The stat management system, while operational, is far from feeling meaningful and progresses slowly since it depends on other systems to be set up before I can make it gain any significance. This compounds itself since the VR gameplay systems can take a decent amount of time to get properly set up and are fairly involved in their design. Worst of all, the character I did create, Clara, while still somewhat functioning, has quite a few issues that need working out as a result of my inexperience with Unity's animation and AI pipelines. Throw in that the way I'm working with the character right now has the issue of using a cutout shader, which is a big no-no in mobile VR, and I was honestly feeling worried that my current build wouldn't even run on the Quest. When you consider as well that I want to have at least 3 dynamic NPCs running in the game here, and needless to say, I wouldn't blame any one of you for looking on the outside and thinking that I've already bitten off more than I can chew. Thankfully though, I don't think that's the case yet. I can say with confidence that none of the things I mentioned just now were unexpected. If anything, I'm kind of shocked how well this project is going. It's unnerving actually. While setting up the RPG stat system is limited by what I can do gameplay-wise, that's actually what I wanted, as developing them in tandem with the gameplay makes it so I only include things that are going to be meaningful towards the gameplay. I've already found myself making cuts and simplifying systems thanks to this approach, which works out great because the amount of VR gameplay systems I'm making is tied in with the number of RPG systems. So having less stats equals to having less VR sub-games, which equals less work. And as for any doubts I was having about having Clara in the game, I just took a page out of Shia LaBeouf's playbook and just built the damn project to see how it was performing. And you know what? Here, have a look. Oh, look at that. It's running just fine. If you're wondering why, it probably has a lot to do with one design decision I made early on, specifically to attack the game scope creep problem head on. My entire game takes place in just one building. Turns out, a good trick to limiting scope is to literally make the physical scope of your project smaller. Go figure. Now, of course, it's always important to make sure that a project isn't falling victim to excessive scope. I'm under no delusion that I'm in the clear here just yet. At the very least though, I've armed myself with powerful design pipelines to make sure work goes smoothly and have a clear vision for what my game is going to be to guide me. Speaking of which, some of you who watched the first video might be wondering why I mentioned deep characters to interact with as a core tenet of my game today. Isn't my game just a VR RPG after all? I'm sorry, but I did kind of tell a little white lie on that matter last month, since I wanted to keep a little bit of the material of the game a surprise for the future. This time though, I'm gonna tell you the full pitch for my game, nothing held back. My game is a VR RPG dating sim about overcoming yourself. Think Persona, but in VR. I hope that'll interest you in keeping up with this project. We'll hopefully have a dialogue system and more jobs to see in next month's video. Till then, virtual dreamers, this has been Gregory, logging out.